It's the Resistance Report from Monday, November 13th, 2017, where we connect the dots and give you context for what's happening. Now, we begin with the Republican Party, which lost big in elections across the country last week that were viewed as referendums on both Donald Trump and the Republican agenda, particularly the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And then, as if Republicans did not have a bad week, came Roy Moore, the Alabama Republican running to fill Attorney General Jeff Sessions' Senate seat, who was reported to have initiated sexual conduct with a teenage girl when he was in his 30s and pursued relationships with a number of teenagers decades ago. Today, another woman came forward accusing him of attacking her when she was 16, and he was a prosecutor in Alabama. This is not great news for the Republican Party, by the way, because remember, the Republican Party only has a few votes majority in the Senate. It's going to need every vote it can, and it also has an image problem in America. Then there's Trump's trip to Asia. We're standing side by side with the Prime Minister of Japan, and here he is, Donald Trump. And he's standing side by side with the Minister of Japan. What does he say? He says, I don't know if Japan's economy is as good as ours. I think not, okay? We're going to try to keep it that way. That's Donald Trump in Japan. And then he told a group of Japanese CEOs, try building your cars in the United States instead of shipping them over. Is that too rude to ask? Of course, Japanese car companies actually do build their cars in the United States, many of them. And then he said of Vladimir Putin, in reference to Russian meddling in the election, every time he sees me, he says, I didn't do that. And I really believe that when he tells me that, he means it, says Donald Trump about Vladimir Putin. And then tweeting about Kim Jong-un. Why would Kim Jong-un insult me by calling me old when I would never call him short and fat? This is the man who represents us, ladies and gentlemen, on the world stage. And today, saying he has a great relationship with Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, accused of multiple human rights violations. So much for Donald Trump's trip to Asia. What did he get out of it? I don't know. It cost us a lot. But notwithstanding all the losses last week, notwithstanding Roy Moore, notwithstanding a trip to Asia that got nothing done, Republicans are pointing to what they consider a bright spot, what they call tax reform. It's being voted on this week in the House with the Senate markup starting today. And here's what Donald Trump wants you to think about that bill.
My plan is for the working people, and my plan is for jobs.
So you wouldn't benefit under your tax plan?
No, I don't benefit. I don't benefit.
You don't think more people benefit?
In fact, very, very strongly, as you see, I think there's very little benefit for people of wealth.
Now watch your wallets. A slew of studies show that most of the benefits of the Republican tax cuts will go to the top. The tax plan gives American corporations a $2 trillion tax break. And these are, let's say, CEOs of American corporations. The big CEOs of American corporations are earning these days about $20 million each. It gives big corporations a $2 trillion tax break at a time when they are enjoying record profits and stashing unprecedented amounts of cash in offshore tax shelters. And it gives America's wealthiest citizens they get trillions more, when the richest 1% now hold a record 38.6% of the nation's total wealth. That's up from 33.7% a decade ago. So they're holding the top 1% more and more of the nation's wealth. The biggest corporations don't know what to do with all the cash they have, and they're all ready to get Donald Trump's and the Republicans' tax cut. The reason Republicans give for enacting the plan is supply-side, trickle-down nonsense. We've seen this before. We've heard it before. We've heard it for years. Give the corporations, give the rich big tax breaks, the benefits trickle down to the rest of us. Hasn't happened. Won't happen. It's absolute baloney, rubbish. The real reason they're doing it is payback to the GOP's megadonors. Now, the interesting thing is a few Republicans are starting to admit this. Last week, Gary Cohn, Trump's lead economic advisor, conceded in an interview that
You, I imagine, are the point person in the White House for big CEOs because you come from their world, they know you. What are you hearing from them right now?
The most excited group out there are big CEOs about our tax plan.
Republican Representative Chris Collins also admitted that, quote, my donors are basically saying, get it done or don't ever call me again. And Republican Senator Lindsey Graham warned that if Republicans fail to pass tax reform, the financial contributions will stop. This is all about cashing in. Republican megadonors view the tax payback, and it is a tax payback, as they do any other investment. When they bankrolled Trump and the GOP, they expected a good return on their investment. The biggest likely beneficiaries are busily investing an additional $43 million to pressure specific members of Congress to pass it, according to the Wall Street Journal. They include something called the 45 Committee, founded by billionaire casino oligarch Sheldon Adelson and Todd Ricketts, whose family owns the Chicago Cubs, and the Koch brothers groups Americans for Prosperity and Freedom Partners. These people are not doing this out of love of America. They're doing it out of love of money. Selling the Republican Trump tax plan should be awkward for an administration that has made patriotism its central theme. That's because patriotism isn't mostly about saluting the flag and standing during the national anthem. It's about taking a fair share of the burdens of keeping America going, like paying taxes. But here is Trump economic advisor Gary Cohn again, the very model of patriotism.
A year ago, I was on the other side of this equation. I was advising companies how to get out of the burdensome U.S. tax system. We were talking about inversions. We were talking about moving companies out of the United States. It was the most compelling presentation I could make to a board is, hey, I can turbocharge your earnings without doing anything in your company. Well, I can just relocate your domicile and you can hold your board meetings, you can do a few things, and you can go from a 35% tax rate to a 15% tax rate. You can deliver 20% of your earnings to the bottom line.
Did you feel guilty advocating that?
That's amazing. No.
As an American?
No, I didn't feel guilty because boards have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. That's what they're supposed to do.
How do you think they got so wealthy in the first place? Look, as more and more of the nation's wealth has shifted to the top over the past 3 decades, more major recipients have poured some of this wealth into politics, buying themselves tax cuts and special subsidies and bailouts and lenient antitrust enforcement, favorable bankruptcy rules, extended intellectual property protections, other laws that add to their wealth, all of which have given them more clout to get additional legal changes that enlarge their wealth even more. It's like a vicious cycle. 40 years ago, the estate tax was paid by 139,000 estates. That's 40 years ago. According to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, by 2000, the estate tax was paid by 52,000 estates. This year, the estate tax will be paid by just 5,500 estates. Under the House tax plan, it'll be eliminated altogether. Republicans call it a death tax. It is paid by the top 2/100ths of a percent. I mean, this is paid by almost nobody now. but it's a generator of revenue. It's not a death tax. It ought to be called a dynastic tax, because it's one of those things that was put into place years ago to prevent dynasties from forming. This is just one of the many ways the rich have rigged the economy in their favor. I explained this in detail in the documentary Saving Capitalism, which is airing next week on Netflix. All of this has been terrible for the American economy. More and better jobs depend on increasing demand for goods and services. And where does this increasing demand come from? It's got to come from the middle class and the poor, because the rich spend a far smaller share of their after-tax income. And yet, here's the problem. The middle class and poor have steadily lost purchasing power. And partly as a result, a relatively low share of the nation's working-age population is employed today, and the wages of the typical worker have been stuck in the mud. The economy is not a wonderful economy. Yes, the stock market is going up, but the wages, typical wages, median wage, is going absolutely nowhere. And the labor participation rate is very, very low. The Republican tax plan is going to make all this worse by burdening the middle class and the poor even more. Don't take my word for it. A slew of analyses, including Congress's own Joint Committee on Taxation, have shown that the GOP plan will raise taxes on many middle-class families. It'll also require cuts in government programs that middle and lower middle income Americans depend on, such as Medicare and Medicaid. And the plan will almost certainly explode the national debt. Remember how the Republicans, for years, they were the ones who were the debt scolds. Everything you wanted to do in government, they said, no, that's going to explode the national debt. Well, this really will explode the debt. Eventually, it's going to cause many middle-class and poor families to pay higher interest on their auto loans, mortgages, and credit cards. Now, look, I don't care whether the top executives of big corporations, Wall Street moguls, and heirs to vast fortunes salute the American flag and stand up during the national anthem, but they enjoy all the advantages of being American. Most of them could not have got to where they are in any other country. I don't know about you, but I do think they have a patriotic duty to take on a fair share of the burden of keeping America going. And Trump and his enablers in Congress have a patriotic responsibility to make them. Instead, Republicans have completely abandoned reality and even basic mathematics. They claim their tax cuts wouldn't add to the deficit, even though their own bill and analysis says it would. They've dismissed the Congressional Budget Office in favor of their own farcical trickle-down formulas. And that's why it's up to us, you and me and others, to stop this. Tell your member of Congress that you oppose this tax cut. This bill will severely harm the economy and the livelihoods of millions of Americans, including probably you. Last week's victories across this country electorally, they are proof that the resistance is bubbling up to the surface in a very powerful way. But this is no time to get comfortable. We still have a lot of work to do. If we stay united and keep up the pressure, we can win this battle on taxes too. And now for your questions. And here they are. First of all, Doug Engel. If businesses are at all-time highs in the stock market and flush with cash, why are wages not going up now? Why would a tax giveaway change this, according to Republicans? Doug, you're asking the same question I ask. Why would a tax giveaway change this? Companies are flush with cash. They have no problem raising cash. They have the cash. But what are they doing? They're using it to buy back shares of stock, and they're also using it to pad executive pay. Those are the big places where all of their extra loot is going. Why would it change anything if they had even more money because of a tax cut? You're exactly right. And what are Republicans saying? They can't respond to that. They are not responding to that logic. All they're saying is trickle down, trickle down, trickle down. Ken Johnson. leaving aside what the Republicans are doing, what kind of tax initiatives should we ideally be pursuing? Do the Democrats have any constructive proposals? Well, Ken, I think the most important thing we can do, progressives, Democrats, is to urge the following tax reform. Number one, a bigger earned income tax credit. Now, the earned income tax credit is a wage subsidy for people who are lower middle class and working class and poor. It needs to be bigger because people are stuck and their wages, the bottom 80% wages adjusted for inflation, are going down. The other thing we can do is to increase taxes at the top. Put on a wealth tax, because what's happening right now is that people at the top have so much wealth. As I said, they're pushing 40% of the total nation's wealth, the top 1%, that they're drawing more income out of that wealth than they are anything else. We've got a whole generation of people that is right now kind of non-working rich, while we have also at the same time a generation of working poor, and that's wrong. Debbie Marshall McGill, when billionaires get billions in tax breaks, they invest those billions in buying our government. If this tax plan passes, what will the wealthy buy off next? Well, Debbie, they continue to buy subsidies. They buy bailouts, such as the Wall Street bailout. They buy rules that help them maintain monopolies. I mean, this is what the pharmaceutical industry has done. There used to be, you probably remember, when Americans were buying their pharmaceuticals from Canada because it was cheaper, a law came along pushed by the pharmaceutical industry saying, no, you can no longer do that. Pharmaceutical industry has also been extending the life of patents and arranging with the generic producers of pharmaceuticals not to produce generic versions of those pharmaceuticals until, they're basically paying for delay. We could go industry by industry. This is what they're doing. This is all amounting to hidden upward redistributions that make the downward redistributions pale by comparison. Margalit Lofer, you say hello from Amsterdam. Hello, Margalit, from Berkeley. I was wondering why your movie is called Saving Capitalism. I thought your slogan was Saving Democracy. Well, Margalit, the fact of the matter is you can't separate democracy from capitalism in the following sense. If we want an economy that's going to be working for everyone and not just a few, we've got to make sure that all of us, most Americans at least, and it's true in every country, true in your country as well, have a say, have a voice. Because unless we do, the rules that govern our economic system are going to be made by the people who have the loudest voice and most cash to get those rules and get rules that benefit them rather than benefit everyone. That's the connection. That's why it's saving capitalism. Could be saving democracy. It ought to be saving capitalism and saving democracy. Donna Keats Cunningham, given that some members of the GOP won't be running for re-election, how likely is it that they will vote against the tax plan? Donna, there is already some evidence that John McCain and Flake and some of the others who will not be again up for re-election are going to vote their consciences and going to vote against giving huge windfalls to the rich and big corporations and putting burdens on the middle class and expanding the national debt. All you need, all the Republicans, Democrats will all vote against it, I think. All the Republicans, it'll take maybe 3 Republican holdouts, and this will die the same death as the repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. But let's not take it for granted. Let's not assume that this is going to happen. It's really up to us. It's up to you. And this is what I come back to very often at the end of our half hours together. And that is that the resistance is not just a resistance to Trump. It really is about taking back our democracy. It's about building a future for our children that embraces social justice and the environment and values that are necessary for our very survival. Many of you are already doing this. In fact, I got a wonderful postcard recently. This postcard says, "Greetings from the Resistance." This is from a group in Terre Haute, Indiana. "Thank you so much for the Resistance Report. You're all an inspiration to our indivisible group in Terre Haute, Indiana. Resistance is," "Resistance is fertile?" Well, that's an interesting. Anyway, if you would like to send a card, we would love to get your postcard. We would love to get your resistance postcards from around the country. And this is where you send them, whether your resistance is fertile or not. Send it to me at Box 9323, Berkeley, California, 94709. That's me at Box 9323, Berkeley, California, 94709. Send your postcard, your resistance group, or your other fertile groups, and we are going to, together, we're going to make sure that we win. We win back America. We win back our democracy. I also want to thank Sasha Lightman and also Andrew Santana for your enormous help, your continuous help, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you soon.